Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you again for joining. So we have 3 more sessions, including this evening, on presenting the path. We were talking a little bit about the homework of the 10 non-virtues. And as Jeff said as well, what's helpful is don't worry about every day having to go through them. But when I mentioned the 10 non-virtues last week, and just as a quick review, 3 of them are things you avoid with your body, like what? Let's just have a quick review. Number 1.
Killing.
Killing. Number 2.
Stealing.
Stealing. Thank you. Number 3.
Sexual misconduct.
Sexual misconduct. 4 we avoid with our speech. Number 1.
Lying.
Lying. Number 2.
Divisive.
Divisive speech. Thank you. Number 3.
Harsh words.
Harsh speech.
Harsh speech. Harsh words. Number 4.
Idle gossip.
Idle gossip. Thank you. Last 3 that we avoid with our mind.
Greed.
Greed. Thank you. This one always trips everybody up. People are like, what is that one? Covetousness or greed. Thank you. Number 2. We avoid
Harmful intent.
harmful intent. Last one.
Wrong view.
Holding wrong views. Thank you. So what happens is Jeff, as you notice, is when you say the 10, 2 or 3 of them jump up for you, right? Maybe not all of them, but 2 or 3 you go, that's mine. That's my thing, right? So again, work on those first. Work on those first. You know, if you find you're a liar and your speech is not that clean and you're exaggerating, you tell a lot of white lies. Look at that and see if you can do that in a better way. If you notice you've got a greedy personality, not generous, like see if you can. So that's what we want to do, is slowly work on those. Another part of, I asked in homework, is what you're noticing you take refuge in. Is it working ultimately to free you from suffering? And what you're taking refuge in, would you say it's a valid, perfect object of refuge that has every perfect way of dismantling your suffering permanently? Think about it. How's it going for you? And I'm just curious, what kinds of things do you seek refuge in?
Walking.
Mantras. And what's that? Walking and
mantras.
And mantras. Walking and mantras. That can be really helpful. Physical exercise, getting outside in nature if you're walking outside, you know, and sometimes then saying mantras when you do it, right? Saying mantras when you do it. So for me, I've got this thing now. I've been doing it for a few years, I notice. So a few years ago, out of the graciousness of some dear friends and students, I got this car. It was not a new car, but it was like the greatest car I've ever had, okay? And it has where I can play my phone through the radio. I mean, this was a big step up for me, trust me. When I was saying to one friend when I got the car 3.5 years ago, I said I was so excited because I didn't have to adjust the side mirrors from the outside. You know, when you do that and you have to get up and you run around and you go and then you sit back then you go, oh, I can't see, I have to, or you'd wait till you have a passenger and then you'd say to them, can you just scoot that mirror in a little bit? But then somebody would bump it when it was parked and back you go. So for me, it was just exciting to have a mirror in the pouring rain or the freezing cold. I could just adjust from inside and see. Okay, but having this phone through the radio was a whole new concept for me. I was driving a lot to New York, 2 hours each way minimum, from Philadelphia to New York, back and forth. And so I started playing all my prayers, which were recorded through the radio. So I have this habit now, as soon as I get in the car, if there's any practice I haven't done or anything, I put the phone on with the prayers, whatever I want to do. You know, could be prayers for Ukraine now. If I haven't memorized them, they're at least playing, but a lot of them I've memorized. So I'm doing the mantra. So a great thing to, as Peggy was saying, to take the refuge in the mantras, your mind in perhaps a more positive, at least that imprint is happening. I find it really helpful for me. you know, instead of having other distractions, having even the ruminating thoughts going. It can be really helpful to have those mantras. I do remember coming back out to California now, I've had a few thoughts where somebody said to me, oh, there's supposed to be a big earthquake soon. And like how they know that, I don't know. But they said, do you have your water stored? And I remembered that when I lived in California at Vajrapani, at a rural place, I did store large plastic containers of water in case there was an earthquake. Now we're more worried about fire out here than earthquakes. But so I thought about that, and I remembered a couple earthquakes I was in out here. One was quite bad, that in an office room of 30 people I was working with, to hear what they were yelling when the building was shaking, as opposed to saying a mantra, right? So there's people I know, the Buddhist practitioners I know said, oh, I was saying mantras when the earthquake came through. So like, it's a great resource for your mind. Like it's a great resource for your mind. How else is it going? What else are you doing? Anybody care to share?
So I'll share. Sometimes when I get overwhelmed, there's two things I do. And one of them is really great and the other not so great. One is I sit down and I play a game on my phone, which doesn't work too well. And then the other thing is there's two books I'm kind of reading. And so when I pick up one of those, it's much, much better.
Right.
And
Notice that we do have some other habits, and you kind of do it, and sometimes the mind needs a break. Absolutely. But then you do it too long, or and you notice that every day you're doing that thing, and it's a time waster and it doesn't help. So if I can just get used to opening the book and reading that thing, that's what I'm reaching for instead. Please try it for a couple of weeks, because it takes about 2 weeks to make a habit like that. It takes about 2 weeks. So try your best to, I would say, to, try and just be really strong with your mind that this is what I'm going to reach for. Instead, in this little break time, in this time where my mind's not doing really, really well now. It's very hard to break a habit, but it's possible. You can do it. So another thing I was going to mention, one of the last, the meditation on renunciation, and also looking at your suffering is where we left off last week, looking at the suffering and any questions about renunciation and anything about the meditation like that. So what I'm going to talk about this evening is I want to finish up suffering, which is the scope of the medium capable being. And then I want to talk a bit about Guru devotion, which is a preliminary to the Lam Rim, a preliminary to precious human rebirth. And then we're going to move into developing the good heart, bodhicitta. So we talked about the 6 sufferings last week. Related, they're also divided into 8 sufferings and 3 sufferings, 3 main sufferings. These are the things we want to generate some revulsion for. And actually, just to start again, I would like to recite the Refuge Prayer, thank you, and really set our motivation, directing our mind in a positive way for this time together, and thinking about through this prayer, which once we decide, those of us who have taken refuge in Buddhism, would try to recite it 3 times in the morning, 3 times at night. Now, this happens to be the version before the teaching, which is great, which is what we want to do. And there's a slight differentiation on the 3rd line if you're doing it in your own practice, which we can explain to you. But really think about, it's through my refuge, through the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, which is the Supreme Assembly. I see them to inspire me because they are representations of the fullest manifestation of myself and the practice of that. And it's through that path that I get onto through a fear that things could be much worse for me in the future, and through developing a confidence by understanding their qualities. This is a true source of refuge, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And then from the merits I create through following this path, and in this case, listening to the Dharma tonight. But the real purpose is, can I become a Buddha, right? To benefit all living beings. So with that, feeling that as much as you can in your heart, that's why we're here this evening, for the benefit of all sentient beings. And really keeping all of our sisters and brothers in Ukraine in our hearts and minds, and also those in Russia that don't support this war, to try to send these ripples of positivity out to them through this practice as we recite this prayer. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Mo Sangye Chodanso Kicho Namla Janchu Bardu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Jiningi Peso Namgi Drola Pencher Sangye Druparsho. Thank you. Let's look at the 8 sufferings. 8 sufferings. And a lot of these are familiar, and some of them relate to the 6 sufferings. We're free. We suffer from 4 different realms. Okay, as we talked about before. I'm sorry, from 4 different states of samsaric existence: birth, old age, sickness, and death. Okay, birth, old age, sickness, and death. Those are 4 of those 8 sufferings. We have the suffering of being separated. The 5th one is being separated from what you love. And this goes with the 6th one, encountering what you dislike. So we know those sufferings. Okay, separated from loved ones, and the suffering of encountering what you don't like, or people you don't like. The 7th one is not getting objects of desire. We know what that's like. We want something, we don't get it. Could be mundane, could be small, could be big. And the last one is the suffering of the contaminated aggregates in the nature, that are being in the nature suffering, which relates to the 3 sufferings. Okay, so you say, well, they talk a lot about suffering, but the main reason it was the first teaching the Buddha gave again is it's so essential for you to understand how you do suffer, to have a more balanced perspective on your life, right? And then to really generate a way, I want to get out of the suffering, to let it motivate you on the path, to start to begin with renunciation, to have compassion for yourself. I really think that's part of renunciation. Think about it, having compassion for yourself because of your own suffering. You don't want to keep suffering life after life after life. So this also motivates you on the path. Really, really helpful for that. And then part of the suffering is why it's taught prevalently, is we'd like to bring about an end to the suffering. No question, right? But it's superficial if I haven't really explored how I suffer. We have this wish, I wish I could end their suffering, but you don't even know how you suffer to begin to face somebody else's suffering. So that's where it's really helpful to explore. So let's look at the 3 kinds of suffering. 3 kinds of suffering. The first one is the suffering of suffering. We're familiar with that. We know, you have a headache, you break your leg, you get cancer, you lose a loved one. We know what the suffering is. The second one, and each one gets more subtle. The second is the suffering of change. The suffering of change. So I just, with Lando Medicine Buddha, we have a lot of meetings right now because the board is running the center without a director. It's going well. And, but it's up and down. Those of you involved in centers, it's up and down, right? So we work at it, and then something came up last week, and, there's some people involved that have been doing this for like 10 years with the center. So they say, well, this is what we've always done, but we're trying to move the center into a little bit newer, fresher place. So, we'll kind of say, well, it's always been done that way. Does that make it the best way to do it now? You need to change things up at times. So somebody called me today, part of the process, part of our team, and then they said, yeah, there's that C word, change, right? That word rears its head, change, miktapa in Tibetan, and I don't pronounce it very well. Miktapa in Tibetan is there's a changing thing and there's an unchanging thing. You might say impermanence is change, impermanence, but what happens is when we think of permanence, we don't think of something that doesn't change. We just think of something that goes on forever. So we're very specific in Tibetan because they really talk about changing things and unchanging things, right? And unchanging things don't necessarily go on forever like that. It's a different view of it. So, but think about your relationship with change, and the change, the suffering of change causes, and it fools us, it tricks us. Suffering of change tricks us. It's more subtle. So again, they give the experience and they give you these analogies or these examples. Okay, you're sitting on a warm, sunny bench. You're outside, beautiful day, and you really enjoy the sun rays and you're sitting and it feels really good. And so there's pleasure. You'll say, well, this is really pleasurable. I like that. There's a little bit of attachment to it. I like sitting here. I want to sit here. And then a little bit longer, you sit, and now you're a little too warm. So suddenly here comes suffering. Okay, something's changed, right? So I'm going to move into the shady side of the bench. You move into the shady side of the bench and suddenly there's pleasure again. And you go, oh, this feels really good. This is great. This is happiness. It's pleasure. And then there's a little bit of attachment. And now I sit there for a little while. And now I'm chilled. This is life. Back and forth and back and forth. And what happens is we misinterpret and misunderstand that when I switch and I make the change, is I layer pleasure and happiness on that. And sometimes we get very attached to that. Now, with moving on a bench in the sun, it's mundane. When the chocolate runs out, it's mundane. Okay. But I know people, they raise kids. The kids moved away. The kids ended up in a vocation that the parent didn't want them to go into. Right? They married somebody that the parent didn't want them to marry. The parent was like, I thought you'd be. Then they bought a house in a different community than the parent thought, a different type of house than they thought. It goes on and on. Right? We impute this notion on here's how it's going to be. And then they suffer because they didn't realize the reality is you have a child, right? You give the best values, you raise them. Karma is working. You can't control exactly how they're going to turn out, what they're going to do. They have their own karmic nature working, but you instill the best values. You try to be a good parent. You make mistakes. Everybody does. It's normal. They go off and sometimes they live near you and drive you crazy. Sometimes they live near you and you love that. Sometimes they marry somebody you adore. Sometimes they never marry. They never, whatever. It all unfolds. It all unfolds. But we impute different things like this is happiness. This is happiness. This is good. And there's no happiness there at all. It changes every moment. And I've seen people so much. I'm just using relationships like that because I've seen so many years of first my growing up and then my friends now with their kids, and how for a minute, like, oh, she married the right person. How exciting. This was a friend of mine growing up. And then I had to hear from my mother who she married. Like to get it on, this is who she married. She married the lawyer. That's great. That's great. Like she's going to be set financially, married this person. Her mother's excited. My parents went to the wedding. Everything's great. 10 years later, he left her, divorced, right? And she was at the bottom. She, the parents were humiliated and she got divorced and the daughter's rejected. So they said, not reject, just things changed. Whatever happened, their relationships, their personal thing. And then the parents were questioning, then she was struggling for a while. Then the next marriage was very complicated. It's like that. So be very cautious with your mind of, when you have the ice cream cone, can you just see it for what it is? totally enjoy it for while it's there, but this is not going to bring you lasting happiness. Suffering a change, which we interpret as pleasure at times. We mistakenly interpret as pleasure. I'm in the shade now. This feels really good. This is really great. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Now I'm too cold. Always like that. So don't get hooked by the suffering and change. Like I said, once I mentioned in a class, a girlfriend of mine, when I lived in Vermont in Milarepa Center, she went off to Cape Cod to join her girlfriends for a weekend. No, they rented a house for like a week, I think it was. She was so excited. I was so happy for her. Off she goes. She's telling me about it for 3 weeks. We're going to go, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, all the rituals. Off she goes. And then she said that the second to the last day, she knew it was ending. All this time she'd been looking forward. She got so freaked out about the holiday ending and what she had to come back to that she ruined the last day of the holiday, the last day and a half. Why? Can you just be present? This is what you get. You got this week. Just be present with what's happening to try to face it. Here's the third most subtle suffering. And Rinpoche really, it's kind of heavy the way Rinpoche phrases it. Is a phrase that pervasive compounding suffering. Pervasive compounding suffering. That sounds really heavy, okay? And what this is relating to the 8 sufferings we just talked about is it's about more subtle to discern, okay? It's related to the continuity of our mind in the nature of delusion and karma, okay? So our mind experiencing delusion and karma, our mind coming into a body again and again and again that suffers from delusion and karma. You know? So as long, as long as you don't have a direct perception of emptiness, you come back with what's called contaminated aggregates. Contaminated aggregates. I'm not saying you're a terrible person. Okay, as long as we're an ordinary being, we have what's called contaminated aggregates. Because my mind doesn't know emptiness directly, doesn't know the nature of reality directly, okay? Then my body and mind, which make up 5 aggregates, one is the form, the body, form aggregate, and there's 4 mental aggregates: feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, consciousness that make up our mind. And until I have a direct perception of emptiness, they're tainted, those experiences. And as a result of that, it causes me to suffer tremendously. Causes me to suffer tremendously. What's the solution? Is to realize emptiness and then thoroughly habituate your mind with that experience. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes study, right? If you're really intent, you can do it, but it will take a lot of effort. So, and a lot of meditation, a lot of classroom hours on emptiness. So again, that's pervasive compounding suffering. And the reason they say it is compounding is every time I don't have a direct perception of emptiness and I impute on my reality, like right now, I might be looking out the window, looking at the computer, there's trees, there's a window, there's a cup here, there's the computer screen, whatever it is. Every time I impute a concrete existence onto those things, right, a seed of suffering gets planted in my consciousness. So I'm just giving you the way it works, not to discourage you, right? But every moment we just have to start where we are and we just have to try our best. So at least I can look at these things as concretely existing. You might even have a thing that goes out of like my picture, my computer, my cup, or the trees are really big. They really look concrete. You know, you look at redwood trees, they're really big trees. But again, the trees are changing every moment. Merely imputed tree based on the configuration I see. So if I can just poke at that, and if I can actually diffuse a little bit by saying, how about this? The computer I use instead of my computer. The car I drive instead of my car. You know, the house that I stay in, the house where I live instead of my house, my room, my hat, my cup. You can play around with that a little bit. So each time you want to just poke at that and realize like, well, I know I have a really solid, attachment to this object of clothing or this item or the technology, or, I see people with their phones. Have we seen this? When people lose their phones, completely freak out. Now, partly because everything's on the phone. Everything is here on the phone. I mean, really, I have my address books, my appointments, but is it backed up? Is your phone backed up? And are you mindful where you're putting your phone, what you're doing with your phone, if it's that valuable? And I know a lot of our lives are caught up in the phone, but I've seen people really freak out. They misplace their phone, things like that. So try to have this sense of you're participating in the karma, waltzing through it. And the more you can question, like, well, how does the tree exist? How does the cup exist? And the cup's breaking down. You get a brand new shiny cup. It's all exciting. And after a few, the tea stains and the coffee stains, and it gets nicked and it gets chipped. And after a while, it loses that luster in the beginning. Everything's like that, including ourselves. So we work with that. Okay, so Patty's mentioning something that came up in her renunciation meditation, which is say that all forms of suffering, all forms of suffering fall under pervasive compounding suffering. Certainly. They're all a result of that too. Yeah, I would say so. They're all touched by that. Most definitely. So, and then there's different sufferings, the different realms. And I just wanted to go through that. It's helpful personally to take yourself slowly through those sufferings and really spend some time with certain ones that really touch you, but not to depress you, not to make you sad. It's to invigorate renunciation. I want to get done with this. I'm personally like pervasive compounding suffering. It's compounding. It's constantly happening every moment as I'm breathing right now. One time I said to Rinpoche about, one time it was with bodhicitta about, you set a motivation. Many of you, I think in the morning, you set a motivation. May I direct all the activities, my body, speech, and mind towards something positive that'll get me enlightened to benefit all living beings. And every morning I set some sort of motivation like that. And then I try to recall it through the day when I'm starting something, doing something. I try to think about it, right? And then, but I realize that is it really merged in my heart? Is my mind always there? Like thinking of others first? Not always. So one time I said to Rinpoche, we do these things, but I don't really have any bodhicitta. So everything I do, and he just reeled around to me very quickly and said, you have to start somewhere. Right? So you try your best. Please try your best with each thing. We just keep moving along, familiarizing our minds like that. But that's why I was mentioning the car with the radio. And the reason is now I get in the car 3.5 years later, right? I've been doing this regularly and at many long rides, right? Is I just am immediately like, oh, wait, let me get my phone on the magnet. Let me get the prayers. Let me push that button for the prayers. And that's how I go down the street. Some prayer thing's going to be playing in the car. I just want it to be operating like, that's what it's a habit now. It's a strong habit for me in the car. It used to be the radio. I was listening to the radio. I don't listen to the radio much in the car. I was out here like 4 months before I even set a radio station in California. So you try your best to keep familiarizing. So let me talk about right now, guru devotion. So I'm heading back to the crux of the path, because I want to get this in about presenting the path, why this is so important. So you go through, and we've been through now most of the motivation for the lower and medium capable beings. Okay, lower scope, medium scope of the Lam Rim. And the way we get out of the suffering, okay, is to meditate on emptiness. And we're going to talk about that next week. Meditate on emptiness, learn how to meditate well on emptiness, get classes on emptiness, read some of the preliminary books, the sections on emptiness of the Lam Rim, then go to something more in depth. It takes time, slowly, to dismantle the core, that initial root of ignorance that you work on with emptiness. Okay. But the other thing for me that is the most important thing in the path is, and more, I think this, when people say, how long are you going to be at Land of Medicine Buddha? How long are you going to move, stay in California? And I just feel like right now, follow the guru. Follow the guru is how I feel. And nothing makes more sense to me than, and it doesn't really matter what I'm doing if I follow the guru's advice. Okay, so fortunately, I have a really incredible teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. I have developed over the years much faith in him and his advice. His advice has not always been easy to follow, but when I do follow it, it not only stretches me to be a more spacious, more compassionate person with more understanding, honestly, and I don't have much understanding, but I'm just saying bigger capacity to serve like that with all my mistakes going on. And yet from that, I can see there's some transformation in my mind for the benefit, positive. So it deepens my faith in his advice, right? So for me, it's like, I don't know, if something changes, I might go back and check back with him. If the center is just running phenomenally well and they've taken care of all their debt and they've got a director and everything's just swimming along, maybe there's more use for me somewhere else. Maybe he wanted me here because there's more of a Buddhist community to help me as I grow older. I don't know. Like there's many different reasons things could be, right? He has a house down the road and he used to be here like a month a year. So I'm really praying one day he'll come back and be able to teach at the center and, you know, be nearby when it was like that. And I used to have a lot of time with Rinpoche, but we just see, so the teacher is really the crux of the path. It's the basis from which everything rests on, that all these realizations come, provided you find the right teacher. And I'm talking, when I say guru, I mean somebody with high level realizations, really key, a qualified teacher. Okay, they can be male, female, Tibetan, or any other nationality like that. But if you're on the Buddhist path, you're obviously thinking to pick a Buddhist teacher. But it's very important for you to find that path that works for you, and then find a guide, a qualified guide on the path that has more knowledge than you. And we talk traditionally, many of you have studied courses on Guru devotion or the spiritual teacher. So we talk about there's qualifications that you can check. So don't just accept somebody because all these other people are following them. You have to check yourself. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama actually says you should be a spy on your guru. And he gives a number, he used to give a number of years and say, take at least 6 years. You have to check them out, go to their teachings, number one, in person when you can. If not, try to go to now live teachings online, live streaming, not recordings, but live, because you get a different sense of them when it's actually live. If not, watch a recording. Engage in a series of a teaching that they're giving, perhaps, if that's a thing. Maybe there's a retreat online. Right now, you might want to get a sense of them leading meditation or discussion. Great. Then check out their students, their disciples. What do they like? What do they like? Does it feel like family? Or does it feel strange? Now, it doesn't mean they're and I'll tell you honestly, a secret with FPMT, when I got into FPMT, our organization, is I can't say the students are perfect, or I mean, in some ways we're just like a dysfunctional family like that, but it felt like family. There was something familiar to me about these other people, as outrageous as some of them are, frankly. Okay, they're Buddhists, they're not Buddhas yet. Okay, and I can't judge, I don't know their minds, but they're Buddhists, they're on a Buddhist path. But how does it feel around them? How do you feel around them? Doesn't mean they're the most helpful people necessarily. I'd like to think they would be, but it's not always like that. It certainly wasn't like that for me getting into the FPMT, but somehow these were my peeps, like that. These were my people. So again, you want to check that out, but you again want to slowly, don't just jump, but take a short teaching with the teacher, then you might try something longer. Okay, and eventually, and you have teachers at different levels. So eventually they may give some sort of blessing or initiation, or even what's called an oral transmission of a mantra, where they recite the mantra, you recite it after them 3 times, and then you have a teacher at that level. Okay, there might be somebody you take refuge with, a refuge ceremony, and then you have a teacher at that level. Right? You might take bodhisattva vows with someone, and then that's a little bit higher level, that they've given you bodhisattva vows. Now you have that guru-disciple relationship on that level. Okay? Then there may be what's called the Vajra guru, okay? Somebody you take tantric vows with and tantric initiation. And that would come when you've got a good foundation of the philosophy, and it might come from a nudge with a certain teacher that says, you need to take this initiation, or you ought to be at that program, or, I got a nudge from Lama Zopa Rinpoche at one. And then if you finish that retreat at Laudo, then you come down and you ask this teacher for that initiation. So I did, and it was actually an initiation I had already had, one of my first initiations that I had no understanding about. I was a new Buddhist, but I found out I was living in the Bay Area, San Francisco. He was giving this deity I had a connection to from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, but I went and there was no translation. I took a bus quite far away for 3 weeknights after work, went to this place, sat there. I thought the teacher was amazing, but couldn't understand a word. It was all in Tibetan, but I somehow, so as a result of that, did I really get the initiation? I got a blessing, I think. So then Rinpoche was kind of pushing me and saying, take it again, because it goes deeper. You can take them again and again, the same initiation. Then I went in and had proper translation from a Tibetan nun in the initiation. And then as a result of my asking, that Lama at Kopan Monastery gave that initiation to a few senior Tibetan monks and nuns that were there. So then it creates a very good cause. Because of my request, they all get the initiation. I have translation. It was a wonderful time like that. So then I have a little bit, okay, now I understand. And then people explaining to me, what are the commitments? What are the vows you need to keep from the nature of this? And that's important too, because there's vows that come along with refuge precepts, perhaps lay vows, bodhisattva vows, tantric vows. You want to learn those vows. You want to keep them well until the level where I decided to take ordination vows like that. So all relying on my teacher. Okay. But as I'm building my Dharma career, because the really qualified guru doesn't want you to be dependent on them forever. They're helping you build your wisdom and compassion. That's the real qualified guru. They're helping you to build your own path to enlightenment, your own wisdom and compassion. And sometimes they'll say to you after a while, if you're dead, very dead set on the path, and you've been following the guru's advice, helping, serving, doing some retreats, is sometimes Rinpoche would say, well, then you decide. When you get there, you decide what you want to do. You have good instincts. You follow your instincts like that. You'll make the right decision. So helping me to deepen. And then when I finish some advice he's given me or some project, some program, then sometime later I may check in. Okay. How do you check in with a teacher? So it's partly you want to make sure you're asking the right questions. And there's 3 main things you check with a teacher about, which is not the color of the car to buy, right? Is you're going to ask them for serious practice advice. You're going to ask them about serious health issues. And it could be for you or a loved one that you'd like some advice. You want to know what practices to do or what pujas to have done to support, the health. And the third thing would be a major life issue. You're asking them, should I move to France? My wife's going to quit her job. We had a problem with our last 2 children. They died. Should we try to have 2 children in this life? Some people ask things like that. Those are the things. So you want to very much, even if it's a Western teacher, male or female, you want to try to keep them in a respectful place in your mind. Respectful place in your mind. So yes, they can be a friend of yours. Think of them as a virtuous friend like that. I love to have students as friends, and I have many. I'm very lucky that way, many. But it's nice from their side where there's some people that get very casual, and I think from their mind, it's not helpful when they're treating a teacher too casually. And I've seen that with many people. Many, the way they'll look at teachers and be like, hey, Joe, are you going to come out and have, and it's really like, it's a teacher, at least you can, like, and I like to treat all the teachers the same, whether they're high level Tibetan Lama, any teacher that came to our center, the ones I was running before, is I really tried to see them all with respectful. I didn't care what level they were at, what nationality, really trying to keep that. And you can still have fun with the teacher. I've had many laughs with Rinpoche, many funny times with Rinpoche, but from my mind's side, never dropping my respect, never not seeing him as this being, this, for me, a highly realized being. And from your mind, they even say, the more, when you certainly get onto a tantric level, and even in the Lam Rim, it will talk about, if you can see your guru as the Buddha, it's better for your mind, purifies your mind incredibly to see them. And it gives reasons when you're meditating on guru devotion, why you can see the guru as the Buddha. It gives different reasons you can outline in the Lam Rim that are very significant for the mind and really tunes up, I would say, turns up the volume on your relationship with the teacher and your own progress on the path by having the guru devotion deeper in your heart. So it's a very tricky one for Westerners because we come from a culture where we're very independent and we're very happy to do things on our own, not without anybody's advice. I don't need to ask somebody why I'm doing this or that. My first question to Rinpoche, my first real advice that I sought after a course at Kopan for 10 days, I'm not a Buddhist. I didn't understand a lot of the things they were talking about. I had a meeting with Rinpoche that was kind of extraordinary, but then after that, Rinpoche was leading a group of students to Tibet when Tibet was relatively open in 1987. And I was not headed that direction, but he was taking about 60 students on a trip for several weeks and showing them from really a pilgrimage, a Buddhist perspective, not a tourist trip. And it was very hard to get to Tibet in those days, but I remember writing a letter because suddenly I, fortunately, had some positive seed ripening in my mind, karma, some positive karma happening where I decided, I thought maybe I should go to Tibet. I had no interest before, but suddenly over a few days, weeks, I had this feeling maybe, and then you get very tossed around. Should I go, not go? It was a lot to change the plans, a lot to change. Some of you have heard that story before. It was a lot to change the plans and everything. Very difficult process to get to Tibet in those days. And then students of Rinpoche just said, why don't you ask Rinpoche? I had no context to that. Ask Rinpoche it's my life, it's my trip. Am I going to ask somebody else? What if he says, don't go? And I wanted to go. Should I not go? What if he said, go? Can I go? Like, are you going to get it together and go and follow the advice? And they said, so here's the thing, if you do ask a teacher advice, follow the advice. Okay. Otherwise, it starts creating obstacles on your spiritual path. If you have trouble following the advice, let them know, either right there in the meeting, this would be really hard for me, very sincerely explain from your side, or later, if you think about it, in a short period of time, go back to them, whether it's email or however you can reach them and just say, I've thought a lot about the advice. I'm really struggling. Just be very sincere. Is there another type of practice I could do? Is there another thing I could do like that? And I remember some years ago, I was at Laudo on retreat. I was the director of Vajrapani. I took a sabbatical, went to Laudo to do some retreat. I was a lay person at the time and I had a boyfriend, and he was supposed to come to Laudo at the end of my retreat, and we were going to have time there, do some retreat and go to Dharamsala, India, and go to some teachings with the Dalai Lama. And in the middle of that, before that happened, during my retreat, my boyfriend got plucked by Lama Zopa Rinpoche to be his second attendant, which we pretty much were sure he would get ordained. And neither one of us was exactly ready for that. We'd been in this relationship for a few years. And so it was a bit of a shock when instead of my boyfriend coming, I got a letter from him telling me that he was going to be the second attendant. And so in this process, on two different sides of the world, me in Nepal, in the mountains, him in California, we had a lot of difficulty accepting it in our minds. Like sometimes I was really like, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm so happy for him. And then other times I was completely freaking out. Like, what about my boyfriend, right? And he was going through the same thing. Like he was really excited on one level, this is great. And then another time he was really upset because he wanted to go to Nepal and be with me at Laudo. And so somehow cosmically, because Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I believe, is a highly realized being, he was aware of what was going on with our minds. He knows my mind. There's no question. He knows we're here in this class right now, all of us, and all the classes going on everywhere, anywhere. So apparently what I heard, and Roger, his attendant, got back in touch with both of us later, is he said to Roger suddenly, if it's too hard for them, then we don't need to proceed, like with Brian coming to help me as the attendant. If it's too hard for them suddenly. So again, Rinpoche always gives you an out based on your level of how you're able to practice. It's very kind. You can always go back to the guru and say, I don't think I can do this, or I certainly can't do it in a year, or can I have more? Just sincerely explain. It's the best way, rather than just ignoring the advice and going to another teacher, trying to get different advice. It will mess up your path. It will create obstacles. I've seen it with many people like that. So fortunately, we forged ahead, Brian and I, and decided we're going to go for it. And it ended up that he was able to come over to Dharamsala, India and meet me anyway. So we had this nice time. And then I think really as a result of all of that, it wasn't so much about Brian getting ordained or Brian being the attendant. I think it was to get me, part of it was that, and part of it was to get me into robes, I think, about a year later. So I'm really grateful. So because of all of that, the Tibet trip of Rinpoche giving me advice that it was best to go to Tibet, I went, I followed the advice. It was difficult. The whole trip was difficult. Getting the visa was difficult. Getting the money wired was everything, but I did it. And at the end of the trip, coming home, and during the trip, there was no question it was the best thing I could have done at that time. So that deepens my faith. So what you do is you may seek advice initially with something small you can follow. Don't ask some sweeping grand thing that, that's too much for you to get your mind around. Some small thing, you work your way up, you develop faith, you try the practice, you do it slowly, slowly, and then you ask again, and you ask something again, and you ask something like that. So it's really the key to the path is finding that qualified being and devoting to them in a respectful way and reading those sections on Guru devotion in the Lamrim and developing that relationship. It comes from your side. The Guru knows who you are. They know who's out there. You have to want it from your side and really go after it, cultivate it, try to find different teachings. With COVID, it's been very difficult, but everybody's online. So try different teachings, check this thing. And then when things open up, go to the centers you feel aligned with, a path you feel aligned with, check the teachers. And when you can, and when it's appropriate, ask for a private appointment. If you have a very good thing to ask them that you intend to follow. You want to get, some of you I know have gotten your practices from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, right? So work through those practices. That's your life practice. You're set now. You're set. But again, we come to it in different ways and we may feel a bit overwhelmed with that. We may be wondering, is this really the best thing for me? Again, so you have to come your own way of how you feel about that person. What happens if you haven't met them yet, but you wanted to get these practices? How are you doing the practices? Because that deepens your connection where you'll have more of an opportunity to meet them in the future. All kinds of things like that. So any questions just in general, Guru devotion? Any questions you might have about that or your own path with the teacher? Okay, everybody's okay? So now I'd like to talk about bodhicitta, developing the good heart. We're moving into the scope for the higher capable being, the motivation of the higher capable being. And a lot of this is around developing the good heart, bodhicitta, the 6 perfections, emptiness, developing meditative stabilization that helps you realize emptiness. So I want to talk about this good heart, bodhicitta, and first begin by talking about equanimity. Equanimity. Equal regard, equal respect for all beings. Equanimity. Bring up my notes here if there's anything more. Yeah. And so what happens is, this is a basis, equanimity, this word again for equal regard, equal respect for all beings, is the basis of the two methods to develop bodhicitta. The two methods we are traditionally taught to develop the fully opened heart, as Lama Yeshe would call it, totality heart. When your heart is fully open, what we tend to do as ordinary beings is the heart's open a little bit. You hear about Ukraine and you go, oh my goodness, and the heart opens to one level. Oh my goodness, those poor people. I want to give some money. I want to support this refugee thing. I'm going to go out and pack up some boxes, because I know there are many cities in the States. I just contacted the Philadelphia Ukrainian Association, and they're packing boxes. They have a way of getting the shipments over there. Medicines, clothing, all kinds of stuff. You name it. They have a whole list. What to do, where they're packing it, how they're getting it over there. It's all very legitimate. And I think every city in the States is doing that right now, let alone Europe and other places. So you can find some interfaith groups are doing it. Churches are doing it. Temples, the Jewish National Fund is doing, everybody's doing it. It's fantastic. So if we have the heart open like that, okay, but then something scares us and we close it up. And there's different times you get overwhelmed with life at times. You come back and protect. Close up, take some space for yourself. We all have to do that as ordinary beings. When you become a Buddha and have Buddha mind, when you become a bodhisattva, which is one who's attained bodhicitta, this enlightened attitude, okay, then the heart's fully open. No reason to close it anymore. There's no need. Your mind is that spacious, okay? So bodhicitta, as many of you know, bodhi is enlightenment. Chitta, mind. The mind of enlightenment is, I want to get enlightened to benefit all living beings. I want to get enlightened. It's cherishing others more than yourself. And it involves things like compassion and empathy, loving kindness, all related to this. But the basis of two of these methods that we traditionally learn in this tradition of Tibetan Buddhism is equanimity. Equanimity. So this equal regard, and there's a famous meditation called Friend, Enemy, Stranger that you can find in the book How to Meditate by Kathleen MacDonald, or Venerable Sangye Kadra, one of our longest term nuns in our group. It's a great meditation book. I've mentioned it before. It's really nice, Friend, Enemy, Stranger. But just think about your regard of how we have people that we like, that help us. And then there's people that we're not, that harm us and harm our families and interfere things. And we kind of put those off to the side. We're not going to help. You walk by a street person, a homeless person, you have a different regard for them. Some people may than your closest relative. I'll notice sometimes the way people look at people in wheelchairs, look at people with disabilities. I see the way people deal with short people versus tall people versus fat people versus people with dark skin. Like we've seen it all. We've seen it all. So we don't have this open, equal regard. And it was a quality that I've certainly seen in His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Lama Yeshe had this quality. Many of these great beings I see have the quality. Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo, the English nun, who the book Cave in the Snow is based on her 12-year retreat. She's an extraordinary being, an old friend. I mean, I've seen her many times and seen this incredible space of mind she has towards all beings, doesn't matter, loving kindness towards all these beings. Think if we could develop that kind of heart yourself. Think of how helpful like that. So what I'd like to do is I just want to, if I can, put you into breakout groups. I'm going to create these groups. This is just 10 minutes, okay? And I want to ask you about that path to bodhicitta, your own exercise of equanimity. What can you step up a little bit? When have you noticed it kind of floundered? Did the pandemic have experiences of that? what kind of judgments come out of you sometimes at other people? What can you kind of fine tune a little bit to realize, like, to work with your own mind to say, well, maybe, I see a certain fixture of this person, but maybe they're struggling. Maybe, actually could they be a mirror for you? So I just want you to work I'm going to put you into pairs. Okay, so do the best you can, just 10 minutes to think about techniques that are going to help you expand this level of your heart in a realistic way for you, of what's practical and realistic and possible. Okay, let me create. I'm just creating this right now. Okay. And you can help each other with techniques. And I will you'll get a warning when we're almost done to wrap up. And okay. And if you can put your cameras on when you're in your groups, that's really helpful. Here we are in our group. So Patty, how is it going with your, wait, do you want to unmute for a second?
Oh, you're my group?
Yeah, I'm in your group.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Oh, let me just let her in. Yeah, okay.
Not sure what she's going to do if she's.
Unassigned participant.
Yeah, she must have just popped in. Let's see. And I'm going to pause. It's also nice because you get to know some other people. It's one way in a breakout group, you get to know somebody else where you start a relationship with somebody just from being in a breakout group. Otherwise, you have your little square, and sometimes the breakout groups are helpful. What I'd like to do right now is we're just going to pause to do a meditation on bodhicitta on a part. And what I wanted to mention is, of these two methods to develop bodhicitta, the enlightened attitude, okay? One prevalent method is called the 7-point cause and effect method to develop bodhicitta. 7-point cause and effect, meaning there's these 7 points that result in bodhicitta. We're going to look at that right now. We're going to look at a couple of those points. The second method was more secret, passed down from Master Shantideva. The first method, 7-point cause and effect, came to us from Lama Serlingpa from Indonesia. And the second, that one was publicly taught, but the second method is called equalizing and exchanging self with others. The reason it was secret from Master Shantideva is it includes Tonglen meditation. Tonglen meditation. We're going to do that later in the course, okay? But basically, Tonglen is about taking the suffering of others in a meditation, in a visualization, using it to decrease your self-cherishing, like a constricted knot at your heart. And then as you decrease your self-cherishing, you're happier, you're more spacious, and you're definitely more peaceful. And then you offer in a visualization as you exhale to anyone you'd like to offer that to. And so, and it's radical because some people would say, why would I ever want anybody suffering? Why would I ever want to give away my happiness like that? So we're gonna work on that later in the class. But what I want you to do right now is the 7-point cause and effect method. 7 techniques, they'd say, of Mahayana cause and effect, or the 7-point method. And these 7 points are, number one, and this is on a basis of equanimity, where I'm first offering myself an ability to think, possibly, that I can have equal regard for all beings. Like the people in my breakout group, we ended up with more than 2, because a couple people popped back in, is that sometimes we have expectations about people, don't we? Right? And I find expectations like the mother of disappointment. It just sets you up for being unhappy. And we really layer a lot of expectations on people. So think about, on that basis, number 1 point of the 7 point, all beings have been your mother. All beings have been your mother. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. The second point is, think about their kindness. Okay. Number 3, repay the kindness. How would you repay the kindness of your personal mother in this life? Maybe you didn't have a good relationship with that mother, so maybe someone else who mentored you. You could think of your father, an aunt, grandmother, somebody like that. Okay, somebody that you cherish like that. Okay, the 4th point is thinking of the love that you feel for these beings, like as if changing the tables as if they were your children. You know, the love we feel for our kids, meaning you just want them to be happy. So suddenly I'm seeing all living beings from that view, as if they were my dear children, dear children. And then the next step is wishing them to be free of suffering. Practicing Maha Karuna, they say, great compassion. The next step after that is altruistic, the altruistic intention, kind of a universal responsibility is, I'm actually going to step up, and in my life, I'm going to make that a goal for me, is I'm going to take responsibility for living beings as much as I can. We're going to do it at our level. That's all we can do. But I'm really going to try to hold that altruistic intention towards all beings. And they say that results in bodhicitta. In bodhicitta. So what I want to do is just sit comfortably, whatever's a good, comfortable meditation posture for you. If you're seated in a chair, no problem, or on a sofa, but have your back straight up, not leaning too heavily against the back of the chair. Your back will become strong, but it creates a nice open flow of energy for you. And it directs your mind in a bit of, this is what I'm doing right now. You can lightly close your eyes. And as you do that, just allow your respiration to deepen. And bring your awareness to your breath, just allowing the mind to settle there. And just reflecting on all living beings right now and all the different beings. There's beings in our community, in our home, in our neighborhood. We're connected through the beings from Tupten Kunga Center in Florida and our Zoom community right now. Think about the more expansive world, whether it's in Florida or Oklahoma or California or wherever you're located right now. The vaster expanding world beyond that. And just imagining, not everyone has a belief in reincarnation, but if you've done some courses, realizing there is a present moment of consciousness right now, like you may be thinking right now. But if you examine the thought process, if you examine that thought, You realize that there was a thought preceding it that gives rise to the next thought. The current thoughts we're having now are giving rise to the next thoughts, and the next ones, and the next ones, and the next ones. According to Tibetan Buddhism, without end, because there'll always be another result of that thought. Another something gives rise to an effect. And every thought we're having right now has a moment before it that gives rise to it. And that moment has another moment before that gives rise to it. And back and back and back. And it goes all the way back beyond conception when the mind is still there in its most subtle form. The body starts at conception, there's no question. Tibetan Buddhism says the mind is there as well. And there's got to be a previous cause for that mind, which are previous moments of consciousness. This is according to Tibetan Buddhism. So if you'd like to go back and just imagine if that's the case and there's no beginning to the mind, to the consciousness, to your specific consciousness, I'd like you to just reflect now on all the previous rebirths you may have taken. All the previous rebirths, all the different lives you may have had. Just imagine as if you could go back years, generations, centuries. All the vast eons that make up planet Earth and its galaxy. Think about all those lives you've lived. Just get a sense first of the vastness of your rebirths, how many different lives you've lived through, as best as you can. Reflect on how dramatic this current life can be. At times, how dramatic. All the people you interact with, all the stories, all the dramas. That may have been the case with the life before this one, and the life before that one. Over and over and over, we're doing these lives until we get them right, till we perfect them. And every life, there's somebody that's given birth to you. Every life you have had a mother. Somebody who tended you, took care of your every need, worried about you, was up all night over you, fed you, clothed you, taught you to walk, cleaned you, everything. Every life, think about the vastness of those rebirths. No beginning. Every life you've had a mother. Think about the inconceivable notion of that. And just think of all the different beings on the planet. The possibility exists that every one of them in one life or other has been your mother. In one life or another has been your mother. The possibility exists as long as there's reincarnation. Suddenly it brings a succulence to our lives of this connection with another being, of that mother-child connection. There's nothing like it. Just get a sense of that as deeply as you can. Hold that in your heart if you can. Every being, possibility exists that every being has been my mother. So please relax. Slowly, when you're ready, open your eyes. I wanted to stop at the first point and ask you for this week if you can continue to do the meditation on bodhicitta. That's one of the meditations for this. It is bodhicitta prepared by Connie Miller, meditation 3. And it has the 7-point cause and effect. And what I'd like you to do is just slowly go through each point. Slowly go through each point. This is a higher level teaching. So don't worry if you don't understand all of it, but you're thinking about the next thing is remembering the kindness. And here it says all mother sentient beings. You can remember the kindness of your personal mother of this life. Maybe you didn't have a great relationship with your mother. So think of somebody else like that in that role. Think of the kindness of other mothers. Or here it's nice when it says all mother sentient beings, as we often refer to them in this tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, right? Because they're so incredibly kind, we can't get enlightened without them. You need other beings to get enlightened because they show you your mind. They let you practice loving kindness, patience, generosity, all the good qualities come from our relationship with other beings, no matter how difficult they are. Helps us practice more patience. So you can think about how kind they were. Think about, for me, sometimes in general, the kindness of something as mundane as them paving the infrastructure in the States so there's smooth roads for us to travel on. Right? I find firefighters incredibly kind, especially now living in California, how they sacrifice, put their lives in danger to save people in burning buildings, to save people who are choking, all kinds of things that they do. You can think of so many kindnesses. Just the fact you walk into a shop and sometimes somebody will say, "Can I help you?" I find that incredibly kind. It doesn't matter that they want to make money and sell you something. It's kindness like that. There's many ways you can reflect on the kindness. Just spend a day thinking about that, noticing the kindness of others instead of we go out and we complain, right? Oh, they didn't have the thing I wanted at the store. The guy, it's so expensive. It's, of course, there's so much kindness right now. How would you repay the kindness? So go through each step slowly. Just do your best. Do your best. You can read up a little bit more in some of the readings. I would stay with that one. Don't worry so much about the second method. We don't need to worry about that. Just stay with the 7-point cause and effect, right? Continue to evaluate your relationship. I'd like you to work this week with equanimity. Notice the expectations you're putting on people. Notice the judgments. disappointments you have with other people. And just notice how you have a different view of, oh, that person, you're encountering somebody in a wheelchair. That, you know, I noticed yesterday, I was actually in a store, like a delicatessen, getting lunch at this place. And I noticed a woman in a wheelchair in line to pay. And I saw somebody go right around her. I didn't even see her. She's standing there. She's there with her thing. And I see her look up at like, who's this guy? You know, and then I kind of got near him and I said, I think the line's back here. And then he goes, oh, didn't even see her. Just like a lump of coal sitting there, like a stand of potato chips. Like it was really weird, but we do that all the time. So just notice that gently. Notice your own experience. Notice when is everybody in the bright light for you? Are you seeing everybody? Is the heart open to all these people? It doesn't mean you don't protect yourself when you're in danger. Absolutely not. Like protect yourself. But when you feel safe and everything, are we all expansive there with everybody? When you go through the checkout line at the grocery store, do you see that person? Hi, how are you? You know, helping you check out. You can't get out of the store without them. We need that person. So there's so much succulence in life. So see if you can work on that. Okay. Any other questions, please? Jeff, please.
Just
Maureen.
real quick, Amy, you broke up bodhicitta and you defined like the bodhi part and the chitta part. Could you repeat that for me, please?
Sure. So bodhi is enlightenment. Chitta, this is Sanskrit word. Chitta, mind. The mind of enlightenment is I want to get enlightened to benefit all living beings. The mind of enlightenment is I cherish you more than myself. Okay. Now this is not about being bad to yourself and neglecting yourself. No, it's having enough respect and confidence in yourself that I realize the path to happiness is thinking about you and doing what I can for you. But I'm coming from a healthy place, not a fractured place, like not a martyred place and not a enabling codependent place where I don't matter. No, from a healthy, confident place, I'm going to focus on helping other people as much as I can, which means I also have to take care of myself in that process. Self-compassion is a critical part of that path, healthy part, within balance, within balance.
Got it. Thank you.
Everybody okay? Okay, thank you. So we're going to dedicate the merit. I'm going to share my screen, and I'd really like to invest in our positive energy right now. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you to Patty, Cecilia, Tupten Kunga Center. I'd like to dedicate whatever positive energy we have created to certainly helping all the beings in Ukraine and all the beings. May that war be ended instantly, and may somehow the beings of those instigating this, may their minds be turned to bodhicitta instantly, pacified, transformed into something gentle and loving. May all those suffering from illnesses around the planet be healed instantly as well. And one thing I wanted to mention before we leave. So March 18th, coming up, is a very special Buddhist holiday ending the 2-week period of this particular first couple of weeks of the Tibetan year. And what this holiday, the Day of Miracles on March 18th, commemorates is the Buddha displaying a different miracle every day to inspire faith in his disciples and in the Dharma. So it's a big, what we call merit multiplying day, which means any positive energy you do will grow and be multiplied on that day. So it's a great day to give to your centers. So if you have the Tupten Konga link, as far as they can donate. And I know Land of Medicine Buddha is needing unbelievable amount of money right now. So if you feel to make a donation, I'll put that link as well, but I don't want to take away from Tupten Konga Center hosting us, and all of our centers need help. There's the link from Land of Medicine Buddha, but think about your local center near you. There is a donate button on the website. You may have to look around to find it because our website's a disaster. That's another thing we're trying to put together. So many things to fix. And there's the Tupten Konga Center link. It's a great day to make donations, help people, donate to a Ukraine charity, something like that. Give back in some ways. However you like to do it, it's really a powerful time to do it. And just be good and be kind to people and help people any day is really worth it. And I'd like to just dedicate, and if you'd like, please join me with these dedication prayers. I will share my screen. Thank you very much. Let's read together if you like. May the precious Supreme Bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. So this is one of our famous standard dedications with bodhicitta. Like, may whatever bodhicitta I have in me, may it arise. And if I have some in me, may it grow and never decline. For the sick, however many sick sentient beings there are, may they quickly be freed from all sicknesses. May all the sicknesses without exception of transmigratory beings never occur again. And it's also helpful thinking about Guru devotion. Make the prayers if you want to find a teacher in this life. Make prayers, call from your heart. I want to find the best teacher for me. I want to find a guide who will really show me the path in a very authentic, precious way that will really guide my mind out of suffering to full enlightenment. In all my lives, never separated from perfect gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma. By completing the qualities of the grounds and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. That's the primordial Buddha. And the long life prayers for His Holiness, the Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. For Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three sublime ones, Savior of myself and others, your disciple, please, please live long. I'd like to dedicate to the great flourishing of Thupten Khunga Center and all of our centers. And it's so nice to have a connection with all these centers where we have people from different places in the country that can join. Thank you so much. Please be well, everyone.
Thank you, Venerable Amy. Thank
Please
you,
pray
everyone.
for Ukraine, really. They really need some sort of divine intervention. It could happen. So please, thank you so much. And on the 18th, I'm sure you're doing something at Thupten Khunga Center. No. So what I wanted to mention, if you're interested, it's a little late for some of you, but 6:30 in the evening, California time, for an hour and a half till 8 o'clock. So if you're in, it would be 9:30 to 11 in Florida or East Coast, but 6:30 to, you can find the link at landofmedicinebuddha.org. Go to our Dharma calendar. And what you can do is join me for an evening. We're going to do some recitations that are hugely helpful, recommended by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and will probably include one of the prayers for Ukraine that Rinpoche has recommended that we do, as well as some practices to remove any life obstacles for His Holiness, the Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So that's the 18th, which is Friday night, I believe. Friday night, March 18th, 6:30 to 8 California time. Let me just see if I can find, if you're interested, I'll get you the easy link. You may have to register for the Zoom room. I'm not sure. It's not that you need to pay anything. If you can't afford it, we always have options. It is, here, oh, she has it at 7 to 8:30. I thought it was 6:30 to 8. So we'll have to, anyway, 7 to 8, whichever one. Let me give you this link. Here we go. So you can sign up and then you get a link. Once you're registered, you then get they'll send you a link of how to get in for that evening. And I better change it on my calendar if it says 7. I thought it was 6:30, so I'll double check with her. And Thank you so much. I hope you can join.
Thank you.
Please be well. I'll see you next week.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste. Namaste.
Please be
everyone.
well.